Just keep matriculating the ball down the field, boys.
Welcome to the all-encompassing sports podcast.
Oh, he's having it go!
You'll be hearing from all of the biggest newsmakers in sports.
Hello, you play to win the game.
Where you'll hear from all types of guests on all topics.
Playoffs? Don't talk about playoffs.
What the hell's going on out here?
And now, with sports, Rob.
Yes, I am Rob, and welcome to this new episode of With Sports Rob. My guest today is Hill Mallory, a close friend of mine that I met through sports here in Richmond. He's a huge fan of the Commanders, JMU football, the Nats, and other teams around the area. He's got some allegiances to other things in the past, but he's a native of Virginia, great guy. I just love to have him on the episode. Much thanks to him for coming on. So here's the episode. Let's say hi to Hill. Hey, Hill. Thanks for being my guest. Good to see you. How are you?
I'm doing well, Rob. Great to see you.
Thanks. Yeah. So I know we do this with every guest, but I just wanted to start by finding out how you got into the sports teams that you got into, how you started falling in love with sports, and what your fandoms are like now.
Well, I got into the teams that I support now probably through my father. So my father was a longtime Washington Redskins fan, and that was probably the first professional sports team that I really fell in love with and started following very closely. There's pictures of me when I'm like a small kid, probably 3 or 4 years old, wearing one of those Redskin, outfits, uniforms with helmet with number 33, Sammy Baugh, was the jersey number. So my father grew up in Ashland, Virginia, and would attend games, in the 50s and 60s with friends, and actually would travel to the games on a train that would stop in Ashland called the Redskins Express. And so he had a deep love of the Washington Redskins, and that passed on to me when I was a young kid.
Okay.
Growing up in Ashland, though, we didn't have like a Major League Baseball team, in proximity. The Nationals did not move to Washington until 2005. And so I grew up kind of pulling for some of the major market teams. I was a big Dodgers fan in the late 70s and early 80s. I played Little League Baseball, and I just loved Steve Garvey when he was playing first base for the Dodgers. And I just remember their epic games with the Yankees in the late 70s and early 80s. I also, I loved baseball growing up. Played Little League for a few years, but my real love has always been golf. And I was fortunate enough to grow up on a golf course, believe it or not. And so, and my dad was an avid golfer, so he really got me into golf, but then shared his love of sports. He was a huge sports fan, and we were a newspaper family, so the paper would come in every morning, just the local Richmond paper, and of course I would just try to read the sports section and study the box scores, and this is all late 70s, early to mid 80s, before the internet was even a thing, and so you got your information from the newspaper, and then I also had a Sports Illustrated subscription like probably every other teenager in America. And that would come on, as I recall, I think the magazine came on Tuesdays or maybe Wednesdays. But I used to cut out the pictures and make collages in my room of all the epic sports moments that the magazine was covering. Of course, they had great writers. But I was really, just enthralled by the photography in the magazines. And then as I got older, started reading the articles and getting into it. Grew up on a golf course playing golf. Was fortunate enough to really develop into a pretty decent junior player, and that got me into to a college golf scholarship to James Madison University. So I played golf at JMU for 4 years in the early 90s, 1989 to 93. But my love for sports was always very deep. Growing up here, was a huge ACC basketball fan, and that was, ubiquitous in this area, ACC basketball. We were fortunate enough to see, Hall of Famers and their entire careers in college, and then watching them go into the NBA. Of course, just a huge college football fan. Even though there weren't a lot of games on TV at the time, I always found myself, watching the big games on ABC or CBS in the 1980s, and just loving the tradition and the pageantry of college football. I grew up in a neighborhood. We did not have access to cable until like 1989. So I missed a lot of college basketball and college football games in the 80s on like ESPN and some of the cable channels. But in this area, we were lucky to have ACC football and basketball. So I got to see a lot of those college games. But just always have been a huge Redskins/Commanders fan. Usually go to one game a year with my family, take my kids and my wife, and they're huge fans. Have become a Nationals fan, and typically try to go to a couple games a year. And on the NBA side, I kind of pulled for the Wizards, but they've been in the doghouse for so long. But it's kind of tough to support them or pull for them. My son is a huge Wizards fan, so we have gone to games usually as around his birthday, and then of course the other sports. I follow golf very closely, tennis, and I'm watching some of the Olympic events right now, and just find myself trying to keep up with it as much as I can. Begrudgingly, I'm probably not following it as closely as I did when I was 15 years old. But
I think we're all there.
Just love following sports, and also the business of sports too, which I find fascinating.
Awesome, yeah. So you mentioned there, I'll unpack a little bit about my story, just give a little bit more backstory to me so that people understand this. You said you used to get the box scores. You would read the newspaper and kind of see what was happening in the sports world that way. I have vivid memories of my grandfather doing the exact same thing. He wasn't a huge sports fan, but me and my dad were, so we kind of tried to get to know the sports teams through the box scores. My favorite story about him, though, is he once, whatever newspaper whatever newspaper he was reading, he wrote a letter to the editor asking why they didn't put the winning team first in the box score. So he had no clue that it was a way home. He was just reading them and he didn't get it. But that's a fun story. Obviously, those kind of things we connect to our childhood. Yeah, so it's amazing to have all those memories. And we're not going to get too much into this, but I will say I think the Wizards are on the. I don't know, and I don't know if you have any opinion on this. If you don't, we can just pass it. But I think the Wizards are on the right track with the moves. I don't know if what they're gonna do with Davis and Young, but they seem to be in a little better position now than they were, say, a month and a half ago.
Yeah, I don't follow it very closely. I did ask my son about the trade, and he was positive to it. So I know he's really digs into the team building and the dynamics and what the future holds for them. I'm hopeful that they get it turned around, because Washington D.C. is a great basketball area. They've produced a lot of great players that have gone on to play in the league. They've also, produced a lot of top-notch college players coming out of Washington and Baltimore. They have DeMatha High School was a powerhouse, and of course Maryland and Georgetown, and then even some of the smaller schools. George Mason had a great run there, right. And then GW and American have also had success. So. It's a great basketball city, but the NBA team hasn't really been relevant for a long time, and I think the fans there are thirsting for it, and DC does support their teams. I mean, the Caps draw incredibly well there, and they've had a commitment. Leonsis has had a commitment to the Caps. It looks like he's starting to make that commitment to the Wizards. So hopefully they'll turn things around.
Yeah. I don't know if you know this. I'm just gonna throw this out. I think Wall is a high school DC product. John Wall, the guy who played for the Wizards back in. Yeah, so I mean, yeah,
he was a great player. Yeah,
and we'll get to this a little bit later. But I know obviously Patrick Ewing came out of Georgetown. He's got some massive connections there. But yeah,
But he's from New York City. He grew up in Jamaica, New York, right?
Yeah. So so we'll get into that a little bit later.
I mean, if we're gonna talk 1980s college basketball, I'm totally tuned in. You know, that was my sweet spot. I used to watch a lot of these games, and of course the Big East was coming on strong and challenging the ACC, and UVA had a huge non-conference game against Georgetown when Patrick Ewing was might have been a freshman or sophomore, but it was a huge non-conference game early in the season. And UVA was a very strong program at the time, and it was dubbed one of those games of the century, which they occasionally get. But Virginia, I think, as I recall, Virginia prevailed in that game. So it might have been played at the Cap Center in Landover, Maryland, before. Yeah, Georgetown used to play some of their home, their Big East home games there. So growing up in the ACC territory, I mean, I had Maryland was a huge rival of UVA. I was a big UVA fan. They're only, an hour away, and my dad was a big UVA fan too. So they were really strong in basketball in the early 80s, making the Final Four several years. Of course, Ralph Sampson was the Collegiate Player of the Year, I think 3 consecutive years. And I remember a lot of their games, and of course, watching Michael Jordan, from a freshman all the way through his college and pro career, it kind of dates me a little bit, but
that must have been fun.
Yeah, it was. I was thinking, when we were kind of going over some days prior to the call, it led me down kind of a rabbit hole. And I remember a game that Jordan played against UVA, and he made a spectacular play stealing the ball from Rick Carlisle, who, NBA coach, was a big contributor to UVA when he was on the team, but he stole the ball from Rick Carlisle and came in and did a tomahawk dunk to take the lead. North Carolina and Virginia were both ranked in the top 5 at the time, and that was at North Carolina's old arena called Carmichael Stadium, I think it was called. So it was and I found the game. I found that highlight on YouTube, and it broke my heart to watch it again because I remember watching it live when I was 11 years old and just being crestfallen when Jordan stole that ball and dunked it on UVA. UVA had a huge lead at the half, too. As I recall, they were up like 15 points and choked it away. But that Jordan was just a phenomenal player. Got to see Len Bias, in that time period when he played at Maryland. He was phenomenal. Of course, Ralph Sampson, and then there were just so many other players too.
Yeah, I think LeBron would have done a 360 and dunked it behind his back. I think LeBron's better than Jordan.
Well, I will. I'm kidding. This is a time like this will be a debate. It's really generational, and I have told my sons, I'm like, I don't care what LeBron does. I respect his game, but he cannot hold a candle to Michael Jordan in my eyes. So
I agree with that. I had some of that late Jordan. I was around for most of Jordan's NBA career, and I knew some of the stuff at UNC. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to get too deep into this, but LeBron's got the long. And I know Jordan played well into his 40s, not well into his 40s, but he played well. He was okay when he was in his 40s with the Wizards, actually. But yeah, I mean, LeBron's got the counting stats just because he's done it for so long. He's been 18 until, what is he, 42 or 43 or whatever. So yeah. But yeah, I think Jordan, I would have to agree with you, and I have friends who are Jordan fans too. Being in high school, basically at the time when Jordan was big in the league, we all kind of fell in love with him. So that we had similar experiences as you, not necessarily being in ACC country, but kind of having that whole, it was a rivalry.
And I was lucky in the fact, we used to have, there was a syndicated, ACC games were syndicated in this market, and it was Raycom and Jefferson Pilot were the syndicators, and so we would get 2 games usually during the week, and it was there were only 8 teams in the ACC at this time. This is prior to Florida State joining the conference in 1992. So Georgia Tech came on in the late 70s or early 80s, joined the ACC, and so they had 8 teams, and they played a round robin schedule. So you got to see every team, twice, playing each other home and away. And then, of course, the ACC tournament was just Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And so, if you can believe this, I would go to school on Friday of the ACC tournament, and the teachers would roll in TVs to the classrooms and allow us to watch the games. The first game tipped off at noon, and then they had an afternoon game, and then they had 2 games, one in the early evening and one in the evening. And then they had the semifinals on Saturday, and the finals were always on Sunday. Of course, things have changed now with, having whatever it is, 18 teams, and now they have 4 days, and not every team makes it. But it was, and of course, back then, even prior to the tournament expanding, which is a little bit before my time, but it used to be if you didn't win your conference tournament, you didn't make the NCAA. There's examples of that, like in the 70s. NC State and Maryland played an epic ACC final, and Maryland lost and went to the NIT. NC State advanced and ended up winning the national championship. They had, I'm trying to think. It was David Thompson was their great player. He ended up playing, I think, for the Denver Nuggets, and he had a kind of off and on NBA career. But it was just, that tournament burnished its reputation before the NCAA tournament expanded. So that's why it was so important in this area when we were growing up. But the really neat thing was you got to see players stick around for 3 or 4 years. I mean, Jordan played 3 years, and that was unusual to see guys leave early. I mean, Magic left early from Michigan State, but most guys stuck around 4 years, and so they were really you were seeing some epic play, in the Big East and in the ACC, and in some instances in the SEC too. But the Big East and the ACC were by far head and shoulders above everyone else.
Right, no, for sure. And let's move to another college sport. As you mentioned, you graduated from JMU, James Madison. So I know you've got some thoughts on. Let's start with your thoughts on this season. Whatever you've got on that. I know you said you've told me you go to home games. Basically, you kind of try to attend as many as you can. I
do. I have my wife and I have season tickets, and our oldest son is a graduate there, so he will go to games. And my best friend lives in Harrisonburg, and we were on the golf team together, so he still resides there. And so it's a real gathering. I have fraternity brothers that make it back for games, and so it's a real gathering spot, obviously, and you get to see a lot of friends throughout the fall, which is just fantastic. Yeah. It's a great experience. And what we've seen, we've been probably going to games, for on a real consistent basis for probably about 15 years. There was a time period there, like when we had small children, and we weren't able to get up there that frequently. But over the last 15 years, our attendance has been pretty regularly, and so just really enjoy going up there. And obviously they expanded the stadium, and it's gone from where it used to seat maybe 10,000 when I was there at school. It was like a kind of almost like a overgrown high school stadium. You had just two concrete bleachers on each side, and some temporary stands in the end zone. Okay. And now, it's the stadium seats 26,000. It has, suites. It has club level. I mean, they've done a lot of things. It's a great game day experience. I love going back. I've really seen the team do well, especially over the last 10 years, which has really been where things have kind of ramped up. My wife and I traveled to 2 of the national championship games in 2016 and 2017. So we saw 1 win and 1 loss. That was tough. The win we saw, we beat Youngstown State, which was a great game, and then we lost to North Dakota State the following year. But Cignetti's first year in 2019, we made the the championship game, the FCS championship game. We didn't attend it. We hosted a watch party, and we had a ton of friends that came. It was one of the best times I think we've ever had, just supporting the team, and had a lot of JMU people there and their kids. And unfortunately, we came up a little short.
Right.
But since then, we've had a lot of success, and then we moved up to FBS. And I believe 2023 was our first season, and we got ranked in the top 25. I was pinching myself the whole time when that happened. And then, of course, making the college football playoff this year was just surreal to see. Our school, which was playing 1AA football when I was there, advance all the way up. Win 3 national championships at the FCS level, and then go to the FBS and have immediate success. So very, very pleased with that.
Nice, yeah. It's always good to have a team that's close by that can kind of go to games and see them. And obviously, you're an alumnus, so that's a fantastic situation.
Yeah.
I had similar. I went to Tulane, not close, but it was super fun watching them play in the playoffs this year.
Yeah.
I know you guys kept it a little bit closer than we did, so kudos to you. It wasn't close for either one of us. But
I was a little worried at the half. Obviously, we were getting blown out, and I had some friends at the game, and I was communicating with them, and they had a great time, and I'm glad we kind of showed up in the second half. I was really pulling for Tulane to show well against Ole Miss. It was a tall task, but I think it's testament to Tulane's commitment to football. They were kind of forgotten there for a while, playing in the Superdome and drawing maybe 10,000 fans. And now, they've really invested in their program. They built the on-campus stadium, which looks fantastic. And they got, great-looking uniforms and logo. and they fill that stadium up, and it seems like people are really excited. It seems like it's a great game day atmosphere, and they're winning, too. And so when you have that commitment to winning, that really does infuse a lot of energy into the program. And then that also, trickles down into the rest of the student body and the university community.
Right. No, for sure. And I was a little wary when they brought in Summerall to replace Fritz. I wasn't sure if they were going to have the same success. Super happy to see it. Super happy to see Retzlaff transfer, a couple wide receivers, a couple other guys transfer in. I'm hopeful that the new coach, who is their ex-offensive coordinator, can bring the same success. But as you said, it's just an awesome experience for the students when there is athletics on campus, which is performing well, and it kind of brings the whole student body together. And as my guest last week, Scott, said, when we were there, they're kind of begging for you to come out and watch games, and it was empty. So, it's much better when it's organically happening. These kids are really enjoying going to these games. But I know obviously both of us are not major conference players yet, maybe never, but what are your thoughts on things like NIL and the transfer portal, and how that affects these schools, or just overall effect on college football and maybe college sports in general?
Well, Rob, I'm glad you asked the question. I have some really strong opinions about all of those issues. I think I'm a traditionalist, and so when I say that, I'm probably nostalgic for the way that college football and college basketball were, in my formative years, right? So you got to think like the 80s and 90s. And I think we're all nostalgic for that time period, because when we're kids, we have a lot less on our plate as far as like jobs and family and all those other obligations, and we can really throw our heart and soul and our focus into these teams and supporting these schools.
Right.
With all that being said, though, I think there's obviously, I think, NIL and the portal has really brought a level or the possibility of parity coming to college athletics. And you take a team like, and I was just listening to Paul Feinbaum this afternoon, and he was talking about Florida and John Summerall moving from Tulane to Florida. He has 30 transfers coming in and 21 recruits. So they have 51 new players. Basically, they're turning over half of their roster as we speak. And so I think, the days of your traditional, what I would call your blue bloods, Alabama and Georgia, which I mean they still are, Texas, Oklahoma, Ohio State, Michigan, being able to household 125 players, those days are over. And a lot of these powerhouses, they were oversigning, recruiting classes. They were able to, put decent players that probably would have been playing for a team like Tulane or a team like, maybe even Ole Miss or Mississippi State in conference. These blue blood programs were able to sort of stash these players away and keep them from playing against them,
Right.
and kind of gaming the system a little bit. And those days are over. And NIL and the portal is really, obviously the portal has freed up player movement. I think there needs to be some limits on it. Personally, I would like to see, one transfer available to a player without having to sit. But if he transfers a second time, he needs to sit a year. I kind of like that. I think it would create a little bit more continuity for the programs, for the coaching staffs, and also for the players. I don't think it's good for a player to play at 4 different schools in 4 years. I just don't think he's getting the college experience, and the education piece of the college experience is taking a backseat to, his seeking playing opportunities. Also, there could be a case made that, having to stick with a program when you're not getting playing time can really build character. You're working through adversity. So I know I might be nostalgic for a previous time. The NIL piece of it, there's definitely there's always been money in college athletics, and to say otherwise is just a naive statement. It was below the table. Now it's above board a little bit more. It's still some reforms need to happen so there's more transparency in the system. Also, I think there needs to be enforceable contracts too, because you're seeing players signing NIL deals and then, backing out of the NIL deal. I mean, the quarterback at Duke, did that, and Duke was, basically holding up his ability to transfer. And I think there's going to be a reckoning there. There's going to have to be some kind of reform or some rules making going on, because these players are really, I think, gaming the system a little bit. I hate to just put it all on the players. They are being advised by agents or persons in their lives, consultants. So there needs to be, I think, some stricter rules in that, so that the schools aren't, left completely exposed, counting on a player and having, signed a player, and then the player on, the last day, announcing that he's leaving, and then you're kind of caught, with, really in a tough situation, not having, a key player to your roster for the next season.
Right, and I think John Calipari in college basketball basically promoted the similar structure to what you're saying in terms of how to deal with the transfer portal. I have a slight personal connection to the Duke thing because Darian Mensah used to be the Tulane quarterback. He transferred from there to Duke, which is another point about how this does cut both ways, because, Tulane can pay players to come in, but if they feel like they're getting big, they can move on. Duke isn't huge, but you can see them jump to much bigger schools, back into those Michigan. It's not a competitive edge. It's good to have the parity that's brought in by saying, hey, we can create a contract. We can pay you million, whatever. If you want to cap it, however you want to do that. But yeah, it's good to have that for these schools that aren't traditional powerhouses. But you still do, and maybe this will change after all the money kind of evens out. But you still do see some of these players move on as you would kind of said, from these smaller schools onto these bigger stages. And it didn't work out for Mensah this year, but he's transferring again, so you never know. Another point about that, in agreement, there was I wish I had the details. I don't remember the names, but UNLV this past year had a quarterback who started, I think, like the first 2 or 3 games. I think he got hurt, but he was benched. And the other guy played really well. So they said, we're not going to play you this year. And in terms of building character, staying on a team where you have to sit on the bench, he didn't do that. He said, okay, I'm leaving. And I think the outcome of that was basically the team said, you're not playing? All right, we'll let you walk. And they didn't really have any consequences for it. But yeah, so I mean... And again, another one, maybe this is the kind of guy that you'll get behind him as, if whoever drafts him, maybe you'll find some soft spot for him. But I know Arch Manning sat behind who's the quarterback at Texas? I'm blanking. Not Ellinger.
Quinn Ewers.
Yeah, Quinn Ewers. Yeah. He sat behind Ewers for 2 years, and he came out and he played, and he's going back to Texas, I believe, for his his fourth year. I don't know if it's his last year, but there is some good still out there, but a lot of it is just kind of where can I get the most money? What's going to happen? Where am I going to be the starter? Whether that's a smaller school or a bigger school, depending on if you want money or fame or whatever. But it's a fascinating time in college athletics, and as you said, I'm kind of in the same boat as you in that I kind of I wasn't a huge college football fan until just before I went to college, but those times were a lot of fun watching them, and watching Tulane play in '98, that was amazing. Catching them on TV when I could. Sean King, I became a Sean King fan when he became a Buck. I was hopeful that he would be the next big thing out of Tulane, but it didn't really develop. But it was. And as I said, our school experience with college athletics, and as Scott mentioned, we did have a good baseball team. I never went to a baseball game. I wanted to. I'm a huge baseball fan. That'll be revealed starting next week when my next guest kind of gets into some baseball. But I mean, I didn't go. I went to one college football game. I wasn't coerced, but I just love sports so much that I wanted to. I went to homecoming my junior year, and I really wanted to see what it looked like. And it was great. It was good experience. They were playing, I believe, at Tulane Stadium, which is not the Superdome, but it was an off-campus stadium. Mm-hmm. They're at Yeoman now, so it was a small. It was, I don't know size. It was probably bigger than I don't know if it was bigger than. I'm assuming it was bigger than JMU's was when you were there. As you said, maybe 10,000, 11,000 there. I think this maybe 17 to 20,000. It wasn't big, but that was a fun experience. It was great to see that, and I do hope some of these kids do stick around, whether it's by the nature of the rules or just because they say, hey, I want to learn how to be a better man. I want to learn how to grow in a system. Whatever the case may be, I do hope that we see some of these players kind of stick around for more than the kind of this jumping around every year with this new team.
Yeah, I think with any new changes in rules, there's always going to be kind of like a breaking in period, and I think that's kind of like what we're at. And what Calipari says, I totally agree. And it's just, to me, it's kind of like the whole portal and the NIL have kind of like jumped the shark, so to speak. And when you have, players, basically just hopping from program to program, and a lot of players enter the portal. I mean, the numbers are staggering. And what's also just mystifying is how many players enter the portal and don't get signed. So,
right. No, that's fair.
I mean, and with college, you've always got a new crop of, players coming along, from the high school ranks. And so I think, there will be, I think these things will get worked out. Number one, before it was definitely a system that did not favor the players. I mean, the players were not getting compensated, and they were locked down, by the schools that they had signed with. The only way that you could transfer and play is if you drop down from 1A to 1AA or to a lower division, or you got your release. And it was so rare to get a release that was almost, a custom that you were going to have to set a year, unless there were some, circumstances like a team going on probation or something like that. So that I do think, you get the one transfer without having to sit is fine, but that's over your 4-year career. Right. And then if you want to transfer again, but you have to sit. And I think it also, again, college football, I mean, it's not the minor leagues it's not minor league football. It's college football. And a lot of these guys are never going to play on Sunday. Like 98% of them will never, suit up in the NFL. And they do need to, I think, seeing these guys move from school to school, chasing something that will never happen for them, I think is kind of self-defeating a little bit. They're kind of like, their focus probably should be on, hey, let me get an education and enjoy the experience of being a student athlete. And I do think that like NIL is going to be like a school like Tulane that has a very wealthy, alumni base and has a big endowment and can raise money. they're going to be in the conversation with a lot of these other powerhouse programs, especially if there are roster limits placed, and also like if there are contracts that are enforced and an actual like salary cap. A school like Duke and UVA, they're definitely going to be competitors in that market because of just the money that they're able to raise. And so just because you're in a big conference, I always like think about Mississippi State. If you were forming the SEC today, you would not be tapping Mississippi State to be a part of it. They just don't have the Q rating, the national brand. They just happen to be in the Southeast. But if they would not be part of the SEC today. They just don't have the money, the alumni base, or the draw. I think a school like Tulane in a market like New Orleans and the money that's associated with that school, they would be in the SEC like they were back in the 50s and 60s, So, I think if you were, just looking at it from an interest, market size and things like that.
Sure.
But it's I think things will eventually get worked out. But the presidents, too, of the universities, they're going to have to step up and make some tough calls on some of this stuff.
Right. And I will say I was a Mississippi State fan when Mike Leach was there. I think he's an national brand. So, I mean, they had a small window, but I get that teams like that probably don't have the attraction Starkville. Anyway, I'm gonna kind of twist this back a little bit to your previous discussion, kind of tied into the transfer portal. I know Cignetti's been super aggressive in getting players from both outside schools and from his previous school, JMU, and Indiana. Do you have any thoughts on Cignetti's year, or maybe how different he's become, or what kind of parallels you see between what he did at JMU and Indiana?
Well, so I was reading the notes about Cignetti and kind of just reviewing sort of like his past performances. He came along at the right time at JMU. We lost our previous coach to East Carolina, and that kind of stung because East Carolina was definitely playing at the FBS level. We were at the FCS level at that time, but our athletic budget was significantly higher than East Carolina's. Like the amount of money that we were actually putting into our total athletic budget. At the time, I remember seeing the numbers, and they were pretty revealing. Now, we've moved up, and so that's all been taken care of. But when we lost our previous coach, I think it was Mike Houston, we lost him to East Carolina. Cignetti came along at the right time. I believe he came from the Citadel, and he had kind of a career that, he had been in big programs, obviously being an assistant at Alabama under Saban, and then he struck out on his own. I think he went to Indiana University of Pennsylvania for his first head coaching job, and he was actually making less money as the head coach there than he was as the position coach at Alabama. But he wanted to be the top guy, and so when he came to JMU, he brought that toughness. Our teams. We had a lot of success, a lot of wins. Some of the play calling, I would get frustrated. My friends and I, we would always, we always felt like when it was 3rd and 15, we could always count on a delayed draw from Cignetti. He never really liked to take chances. He was a field position guy and wanted to win the field position game. We saw a lot of, positive punts, from our own territory and stuff like that. So, that was kind of frustrating. But I think too, he was coaching to, the strength of his squad. So, moving on to Indiana, I'll be honest with you. When I saw that he got the job at Indiana, kind of knowing a little bit of the backstory that initially he told Indiana no, and then they just kept bringing a more and more lucrative offer, and eventually, you bring so much money to the table that it's life changing and it's generational wealth. And I think at his age, he was like, "Hey, I might as well go on and do this. I have like a 4 to 5 year run at Indiana before, probably I'm going to get fired. And that's how I was thinking. Like, I'm like,
Okay.
hey, you're going to go and you're going to make $20 million over 4 or 5 years. They'll give you 4 or 5 years like they do everyone else, and you'll win 2 games or 3 games a year in the Big Ten, and you'll get fired after that. And lo and behold, he has totally surprised me. He's been extremely successful. And I have definitely been eating crow the last 2 years because I did not think Indiana would be where they are now, as national champs. And then, of course, making the playoff last year, you kind of thought that was like a one and done, like a fluke kind of thing. But, he's proved to be able to really work the portal and also NIL, So, and, Indiana is has a big alumni base. They my understanding is they have a lot of givers in that alumni base. They do have some big dollar donors. You got Mark Cuban in there and others. But basketball has always been the big game there, and to say otherwise would just be historically inaccurate. But they and I think probably their last great player was Antoine Randall, like in the the early '90s or something. Like when they were decent and made a bowl game. But it's blown me away. Mendoza, the success he's had, the game that he played against Miami, the toughness that he showed. He took a lot of tough hits, big hits. He got hit up underneath the chin strap there and bloodied his mouth. But he made that big fourth down run. It's going to be eponymous with Indiana football for forever. And just a classic college football memory. I mean, watching that game, and that game was not put away until the very end. When they had the pick at the end. I mean, Miami still, had a legitimate chance. So it was a great game, a great season for them to go 15-0, to win, to have the Heisman Trophy winner on your team, to do it the way they have. It seems like they have just a real toughness about them. They went on the road, had a big win at Oregon. And then, they came back, beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. And then the teams they beat in the playoffs, a who's who of college football, again, beating Oregon again. And the way they beat Oregon, just totally dominating Alabama and Oregon. And then, playing a very good Miami team that was really kind of peaking at the end of the season. Just a testament to their success. And I guess Cignetti, it's making me look bad. But I'm really, really happy for him. And I'm also just extremely happy that he's had some of that success with former players from JMU.
Yes, yeah. Getting to something else we kind of got into in your intro, I wanted to discuss your thoughts on maybe not the pictures, but your Sports Illustrated early viewing of sports. You're kind of picture fan. What was your viewing experience like for this last weekend's Super Bowl?
So I attended a Super Bowl party that my work colleague and friend he hosted at his home in Midlothian. So my wife and I drove over there and did the pregame and the first half. And of course, like when you're at a Super Bowl party, you really can't hear the game, the commentary and the analysis, which I really like. I'm a huge Mike Tirico fan. Chris Collinsworth, I could take, either here or there. Sometimes his analysis is good. Sometimes he's a little repetitive, but Tirico calls a great game. I love his the way that he presents a game and calls it. I got that in the second half, but the game really lacked a lot of energy. I just thought that, and I'll be honest with you. I think I told you this, shared this with my son. It was just a real dud. I just, not seeing, a touchdown until the fourth quarter. It did get exciting in the fourth quarter. I will say that, New England looked like they had a little bit of a spark until Drake May threw, well, I guess the pick six, which was, I guess, technically was a pick six, that, gave them a cushion. But then, they were coming back and driving again. They scored, and then they were coming back driving again. And he threw I don't know why he threw that pass into double coverage. It just, I don't know if he saw something and was just trying to make a play, or the ball sailed on him, or he just, I know he was hurt. So, you have to give like a little bit of benefit of the doubt. But Seattle played a great game. I did watch a lot of the post game. So, try to soak up some of the interviews and some of the analysis after the game. I think, it was just a suffocating defense, and that, May probably being a little banged up, and New England not really having an answer. And I think the pressures that they were able to get on him, I know that it was kind of similar to last year, the way the Eagles attacked the Chiefs. They really weren't doing it with any blitzing. It was just pressure from the front four, which, I guess Seattle goes probably 7 deep on that front four,
right?
With the substitutions and stuff. And, they were just putting so much pressure on May. Darnold had a solid game. Of course, Seattle won the kicking game, with the field goals that were made, and then the great punting that they did, that they were able to pin New England back into really poor field position, which, you don't think about it. It's not a kind of a exciting thing to talk about, but, that in pro football can be a game, a game changer, can make the difference in a championship game. How you special teams and punting.
I don't know if you have any thoughts on the staying power of either the Patriots or the Seahawks in terms of what they look like down the line.
I don't. I know that I'm a big Mike Vrabel fan. I just loved him as a player, and then I have no idea why Tennessee would have gotten rid of him as coach. It's like the most baffling personnel decision that you could have done. I guess there might have been a conflict in the front office, but the Patriots really, usually you don't fire a coach after 1 year, but they got rid of Mayo after 1 year. And I guess, when you're looking around and you're doing like an evaluation after the season, and you see Mike Vrabel's available, and, you just go and you just eat that money on that contract for Mayo, and you just go out there and hire Vrabel. And it's like, you look back on it, and it's a rounding error in the value of the franchise and their operating revenue, right?
Right.
So, what's the big deal if you're paying a guy $20 million not to coach you? But, again, Vrabel came in, and you could see just the mindset change. They won 14 games. Yes, I think you could probably do a deeper dive and say, well, they only played maybe 3 or 4 tough teams in the whole, regular season. But the fact is, in the NFL, it's cliche, but it's any given Sunday, and you've got to rise up and play, these teams, even if you were playing in maybe a weaker division. But I think it just illustrates, they're probably a couple of pieces away, assuming, May's going to be fine, whatever is ailing him now, he's going to recover in the off season. I know that they probably need to, I would imagine, just kind of high level analysis, but it looks like they need to maybe invest in a solid running back, to give, I think it seemed like Seattle was able to just really pin their ears back and go after May because there wasn't really a running threat there. So
Sure.
But I don't know enough about like sort of their personnel makeup to really make a solid evaluation. The team I follow the most are the Commanders, and I follow like kind of closely to the NFC East teams because they're just our biggest rivals. But
sure.
And I have I think again New England will probably be there next year. I don't know if they'll win 14 games. They're going to be playing a first place schedule. The Commanders shifted from a fourth place to a second place schedule. And and with that, that it was just a tougher road for them, and they had injuries and only ended up winning 5 games versus winning 12 the season before. So the NFL is really year to year, and they can turn around pretty quickly,
Sure.
which is just amazing.
So yeah, before we move on to the post game, let me just get your thoughts. I know you had something to say about Belichick and Kraft. I think you have a competing opinion from what Scott and I talked about. The Hall of
I
Fame
do.
Okay.
I think the number one, the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Your previous guest, the NFL does not control the Pro Football Hall of Fame. It's independent of the NFL. So I noticed that he had said that. I think it's just a farce that Bill Belichick did not make it into the Hall of Fame on the first ballot. And if they're trying to send a message, then Jimmy Johnson, I think, summed it up. He had chartered had reserved to charter a plane to go to Canton for Belichick's induction, and he said that he's not going to go to Canton this year. If you're not a first ballot Hall of Famer with 8 rings, 6 as the head coach, I don't know what qualifies you as that. And I understand where people are coming in with the I guess the old timers ballot. I don't know what, like, for lack of a better word. I know Roger Craig, it was his last year of eligibility, and so there was a big push. But that needs to be reformed. I mean, they need to keep the coaches and the owners in a separate category. Let the players be the players, the coaches be the coaches, and the owners be the owners. Candidly, Bob Kraft is not Bob Kraft without Bill Belichick, because Bill Belichick was in the trenches every day, game planning and scheming, against all of his opponents and winning these games and making a lot of the personnel decisions, but making all of the coaching decisions as far as putting his coordinators and assistants, developing the game plans and executing that. The players win the games or lose the games. The coaches, are the decision makers, but the owner, he's creating the framework, but he takes a back seat to the players and then to the coaches. So I think Bob Kraft is deserving of the Hall of Fame. Much like Jerry Jones, Bob Kraft has been instrumental in growing the NFL as a business. Yeah. I just don't like, the narrative out there that these two guys need to be punished for, Deflategate and Spygate. It's just, to me, I mean, Deflategate's a joke, and Spygate, I know you've got some different opinions about that, but the bottom line is all of these teams are always working for an edge, and to say otherwise is just being naive.
I agree with you that, I know that. That's another thing that Jimmy Johnson said, was that all the coaches, he would take his coaches and try and figure out what plays were being run by the other.
Absolutely.
Everyone was being said. You brought up something I was intrigued by. I know that one of the former players, I think it was a Belichick former player, at least, or one of these talking heads who's a former player, actually said, if Bill Belichick's not a first ballot Hall of Famer, there should be no coaches on the first ballot Hall of Fame. Like he says, Andy Reid should not get in first ballot if that's the case. Yeah. So yeah.
It's to me, there's he should be unanimous first team, first ballot, as should Tom Brady be unanimous. If you cannot agree that these guys are transformational, generational players, then what are you doing? You're a journalist. You follow pro football, and yet you can't put aside some kind of personal bias and look at the record. And the record speaks for itself. He won 6. He coached in as the head coach, I think it was 10. I know that he won 6 and he lost 2 to the Giants, 1 to the Eagles. So, he coached in 9. Okay. He made, how many championship games did he make? Like 11 in his 11 championship games. It's unfathomable. There's not another coach that had that level of success over that period of time. Not even Lombardi or Hallis or Paul Brown or Don Shula. I mean, or Chuck, Knoll. Yeah, I mean, Parcells. I mean, he did not win at the rate of Belichick, and
Sure.
I just look at also his coaching tree. Like he's had a lot of successful assistants and coordinators. Some haven't been as successful as others, like most coaches in their coaching tree. But
Right.
I
Right.
think that I know that the argument is, well, he's nowhere without Tom Brady. Again, I think it was a joining of these elite talents that got them to this elite status. And maybe you can't do it without him, but maybe Tom doesn't do it without Belichick.
Definitely fair, Hill. And now I want to get to the post game. So obviously you said you're an avid golfer. The Waste Management Open was last weekend. You got Pebble Beach this week. Talk to me a little bit about maybe your views on Scotty Scheffler, maybe your views on the recent events. What just give me some golf information that might be useful to the viewers.
Yeah, well, this is my sweet spot, Rob. So thanks for asking the question. So if I know this will be hard to believe, but my son, my younger son, attended the Waste Management Open on Saturday.
Ah.
His girlfriend goes to Arizona State University. She's a resident of Ashland, and she's a senior there. So he flew out and spent some time with her. They went to the tournament. He sent me a lot of pictures from the tournament. He had a great experience. Sent me pictures of Scotty and some other players.
Yeah.
So my opinion on the Waste Management Open is it's one of the best tournaments on tour, not just for the atmosphere of the stadium hole, which is number 16, and the infrastructure build out and the number of fans, but also the quality of the golf course. It really, the way that they have it set up, the condition that it's in, really demands precise placement off the tee and great ball striking into the greens. And so what you saw at the end, Chris Gotterup, this was his second win of the year, beat Hideki Matsuyama in the playoff. A lot of people were watching that playoff right up until the Super Bowl kickoff, so it was great for golf in that regard. But Gutterup prevailed for his second win. Hideki struggled on Sunday. He was driving the ball very poorly, but his iron play and his short game were exceptional to keep him in it. And of course, Scotty Scheffler shot 64 on Sunday to close within one shot and finish in third place. And so Scotty is off to a great start. He won the American Express in Palm Springs a couple weeks ago. He's, of course, trending. This is the time of the year where guys are really kind of getting their games rounding into shape for the Players' Championship, which will happen in a couple weeks, and then the Masters to follow in early April. So they're all kind of focused in on the Masters, and you can see, guys like Rory and Scotty and other players are really, kind of trying to dial in their games right now for that run to the Masters.
Okay, yeah.
So, and Scotty's the world number one. His win at American Express has given him, I believe it's 20 PGA Tour wins. And to think about this, he's at his winning percentage since his first win, he's winning at like a 25-26% clip since his first win. So, but that pales in comparison to what Tiger's winning percentage was over that same period of time. So Scotty is going to go down. If his career maintains kind of the same trajectory over the next, I would say, 10 years, I think he's definitely going to be he's already a generational player with 20 wins. He's already separated himself. He's won 3 of the 4 majors. So he's won the PGA, he's won the Open Championship, and he's won the Masters. He just needs to win the U.S. Open to complete the career Grand Slam, which is huge. It's basically the equivalent of like winning the Grand Slam in tennis. You're playing on all kinds of different surfaces to win, and golf is kind of similar. There's all sort of different. These tournaments are so different from each other and demand different things, and so. he's in line to do that. The U.S. Open this year is being played at Shinnecock Hills on Long Island, which is one of the great golf courses in the United States, and it probably will. I mean, Scotty will go in there as a favorite. Obviously, I mean, saying this in February, the tournament is 4 months away, but there's a good chance. There's a good chance that he could be the Masters champion going into that tournament. So I'm really excited about the golf season this year. There are a lot of things happening in professional golf. I mean, LIV is having they're losing some of their marquee players. Of course, Brooks Koepka left, and Patrick Reed has left too. So there's some question marks about the viability of LIV going forward. But the PGA Tour has a new commissioner. His name's Brian Rolapp, and he was an executive with the NFL, and he's come into the tour and has really brought a kind of a breath of fresh air, and you're going to see some major changes for next season, and the 2027 schedule is going to be revamped. And it's going to be very exciting. I think what you're going to see is a higher quality product coming out of the PGA Tour, and it's going to be a more compelling TV product too. And I think people are really going to get behind it, and I think it's going to be very exciting.
Awesome.
Yeah. So the Pebble Beach is this week, which is an iconic PGA Tour tournament. I mean, it's been played for, I think, 80 years. It's played at Pebble Beach Golf Links in Monterey, California, which is an iconic venue. And this is a signature event. So you're going to have the top names competing this weekend. And I look forward to it, especially since we've all been snowbound. I'm kind of ready to get out and play some golf. Hopefully maybe this weekend that will work out. But it's always a lot of fun to watch that tournament, and it's a beautiful golf course, and it always kind of gets you fired up to play golf.
So that may be the perfect ending spot, but I'm going to ask you one more thing. I'll wait to get into a rivalry kind of heated thing between the Bulls and the Knicks in the 90s and that stuff till next time. But I know you're a big Commanders, Redskins fan, so thoughts on maybe the ownership difference? Obviously, I'm not breaking any news here. Very different between Dan Snyder and Josh Harris.
Yes. All right. So, my fandom goes back probably to 1980, 81. So like when I was 9 or 10 years old. The years before that, I don't really recall. But I do remember the owner when I was a kid. His name was Jack Kent Cooke. He actually owned the LA Lakers at one time. He owned the Redskins, and he was just a phenomenal owner. He hired Joe Gibbs and Bobby Beathard, and they came in and rebuilt the Redskins. Went to 4 Super Bowls in 9 years, won 3 of those titles. Unfortunately, Jack Kent Cooke, he didn't do a lot of great estate planning. And so when he passed away, he really, his estate, his sons had to sell the team for the estate taxes from his estate. And so that opened the door for Dan Snyder to come on and buy the team. And, as a fan, I remember, when Dan Snyder bought the team, he was a young guy. He was probably in his mid-30s when he bought the team. And a lot of people were like, how can a guy in his mid-30s afford an NFL team? It was a different time. It's the late 90s. But, one thing about Dan Snyder that you kind of picked up immediately is that he did not hire football people to make football decisions. He wanted to be involved in it. And there was he and Vinny Serrato would, buy a Street and Smith's magazine and get in Redskins plane and fly around and go to look at, players. I mean, they, thought they were, personnel guys and stuff. Right. And, it was the beginning of sort of a long, painful decline. We had a few decent years in there. So we won the division a couple of times. We had the RG3 season in 2012 where, we had a great run at the end to win the division and make the make the playoffs. We ended up losing to Seattle. And, Robert Griffin III got hurt in that game and, was never really the same after that. But the problem that with Snyder was that he, constantly meddled and didn't really, he wasn't one of these owners that hired good people and let them do their thing. And when the team was sold, I was one of those fans. Like I wouldn't believe it until it was actually finalized.
Right.
I mean, I was reading all the blogs and everything on X and social media, and there were so many fans were like, he's going to do something at the very end and kill this deal. But when it closed in the summer of 2023, there was a vibe shift within the fan base, and then, of course, it was too late in the process to like make any wholesale coaching changes. But one thing I really like about Josh Harris is he is an actual legitimate fan from the old days and understands the importance of like the little things, like embracing our history, getting the branding right, the uniforms right, all of like the little things that really knit a fan base together.
Sure.
Because the team changes every year. I mean, you've got like a third or 45% of the roster turns over on a annual basis in the NFL. But the thing that you hold on to are the memories of all the past great players, but also like the little things, like you being a Jets fan, going back to their days at Shea Stadium and, just like the whole vibe of that and like, the former great players like Freeman McNeil and
Right.
Richard Todd and, Joe Namath and, Mark Gastineau and,
Right.
Joe Klecko, I can't believe I just named 4 Jets. Probably couldn't name 4 on the current roster.
I was about to say that.
Four from the 80s
Thanks,
and
Al.
90s. Yeah, I mean, Richard Todd. But, I think like the little things that Josh Harris is doing are starting to really resonate. So having gone back to a couple of games since his ownership, since he bought the team, immediately you see the stadium is not great, but they're doing the little things in the stadium to try to make the game day experience better. They introduced an alt uniform this year that harkens back to the glory days of the 80s, which, the only thing that's different really is the helmet.
Okay.
And, they've embraced that they had like a homecoming day where they brought back a lot of the old players. They're bringing back the guys from the 70s and 80s and 90s to celebrate, with the current team. It's really building out a community, and it's not, they're have made all of the right moves, in my opinion. And now, they're talking about, well, I mean, it's the deal has been finalized, but they're going to build a new stadium at the former site of RFK, which is bringing the team back to, it's the heart of the city and to, its origin, basically its origin place. And so that is going to be extremely exciting for the fan base.
Nice.
It actually, just that shift of a few miles from, Maryland suburbs to the city, it really does change the whole dynamic of the team. It becomes the city's team again. And, it's closer to a lot of the fans in Northern Virginia and in the suburbs of Northern Virginia. Makes it a little bit easier to get to games too. You're going to have multimodal transportation to get in there. You'll be able to take the train into games, go to Union Station, get out, walk to the stadium. So real excited about the possibilities. It's 3 years away. They're saying that the new stadium won't open until 2030. But I've seen renderings of the new design, and as a fan of the team, I'm so excited because it does harken back to the RFK. It has a similar aesthetic to RFK, which I'm very happy about.
That's awesome. So I'm not going to do this today because we're out of time. I know you got to run, but I know we'll get your thoughts on Deron Payne the next time we sit down and talk about this. But I want to
that sounds good. I look forward to it. And let me maybe bring me back in, in the summertime. We can talk a little bit about the golf majors that have been played. And we can talk a little bit about the Commanders and their prospects for 2026.
What's happening in the future? Sure. But I wanted to thank you. You've brought a wealth of knowledge. Much appreciated, Hill. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Rob.
See you soon. Thanks.
Thanks.